And now we're at the very end of the book where we have some rules and arguments. So now we're just going to go through some points because all of these rules and arguments are beneficial for your mind. This section is mental protein, strengthener for your mind, nutrients for your intellect. And so the first point here is that godhood can be explained in three ways. Explained as the power to create. That's Al-Ash'ari's definition of godhood, the power to create. Or it can be explained as being entitled to be worshipped, yani deserving worship. That's easier. Deserving worship. Godhood can be explained as deserving worship. And godhood can be explained as absolute independence, meaning that God is existing without needing anything and everything needs him. Some said this attribute of God, his not needing anything and everything needing him, that is his attribute of godhood itself. So we talked about that last time. This is here because comprehending it is good for your mind. The second point is that every doing has a doer. Every doing has a doer. Okay, so that means we're saying there's a God. But be on alert. If you say, yani, if you make an argument that is this, every painting needs a painter, every building needs a builder, etc. Like you might have heard some brothers or sisters say when they're teaching someone who's just learning. They want to introduce that person to the knowledge and introduce that person to the monotheism. And they want to prove that God exists by some rational argument. And so they say to that person, every painting needs a painter, right? Every building needs a builder, right? But if you say that, then your opponent could ask you, does the painter have a maker? Does the builder have a maker? And you will say yes. And then he will say that you are confirming that God has a maker. Because when you say, if you were to say, every painting needs a painter, every building needs a builder, and therefore every creation needs a creator. So then your opponent could say to you, does the painter have a maker? And does the builder have a maker? You have to say yes. So then he could say to you, but so then you said, and likewise, every creation has a creator. So you're saying that the creator has a maker. And then you're going to say, no, I'm not saying that. No, that's not what I mean. And you never want to find yourself there. When I say you never want to find yourself there, I don't mean if you made a mistake, you don't want to retract it. Yeah, if you ever make a mistake, you want to retract it. And that should be easy for you to retract your mistake. But you don't want to, with confidence, produce a faulty argument and then someone takes all the wind out of your sails by asking you a question that make you need to double back and fix your words. So in this case, just say, if you want, suffice with every doing has a doer. And you don't have to keep giving every this needs a that, every this needs a that. Just say every doing has a doer. That's sufficient. Or you could say anything with a beginning could not have given itself that beginning. And this is sufficient. From here, no atheist should be able to escape your grasp, only if you don't know how to stay on point, stay on track. If you're not good at staying on track, the atheist who doesn't want to shut up when he's talking to you, if you were to say this to him, and really this is decisive, but if you're too loose and you can't focus, he's going to get you off of this. So you don't want him to do that. Next point, opposites prove God's oneness. Yes, what does that mean? Yani, for example, you can't stand up and sit down at the same time. It's impossible. This impossibility proves the oneness of God. Because had there been more than one God, you would have been able to sit down and stand up at the same time. Because then one God could will for you to sit down and the other one could will for you to stand up at the same time. Then you would stand up and sit down at the same time, but that's impossible. So you're standing up and sitting down at the same time in reality is impossible. That's because you are under the power of one God. You are under the creating power of one God who didn't make it possible for you to do two simultaneous opposites, to do two opposites simultaneously. Yeah, and he didn't make it possible for two opposites to exist in the same vessel simultaneously, like to be moving and still at the same time. It's not possible in God's creation. And to be sitting and standing at the same time is not possible in God's creation. So opposites prove God's oneness. Now I'm keeping it a little bit brief because this is all a review. We covered this last time. And the recording is available also if you wanted to go back and review these points. So now the next point is the simultaneous negation of opposites is not necessarily impossible. Only if they alternate on the subject is their simultaneous negation impossible. What does simultaneous mean? Means at the same time. Negation is denial of opposites like knowledge and ignorance. So the simultaneous negation of opposites, like denying knowledge and ignorance from the same thing at the same time. Not that he has knowledge at one time and he's ignorant at another time, but he neither has knowledge nor is ignorant. Is this possible? Or that something is not moving nor still? It's neither moving nor still. Is this possible? Is there a way to negate two opposites simultaneously? The simultaneous negation of opposites is not necessarily impossible, only if they alternate on the subject. Meaning that this is useful for you, and Al-Wahhabi says to you, how can you say that Allah is neither inside of the world nor outside of the world? And he is not in contact with the world. He's not connected or touching the world, nor is he disconnected from it. And he is not moving and he is not still. How can you deny these opposites simultaneously? Yani, the meaning of his question is, it's invalid to deny opposites simultaneously. So you might say to him, there's nothing wrong with negating these opposites simultaneously. What's your problem? So you might say, well, look, if I say about you that you're not in the masjid somewhere, nor are you outside of the masjid somewhere, you are not in the masjid somewhere, and you're not outside of the masjid somewhere, doesn't that mean actually you don't exist? So you should say, yeah, it does mean that. So you say, yeah, that's right. So that would mean, if that would mean you don't exist, that means that really you cannot negate these opposites simultaneously, because that's going to negate existence of you, of a thing. So you say, no, 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 it doesn't negate a thing's existence always. It only negates a thing's existence if those two opposites alternate on the subject, on the issue at hand, like movement and stillness. So you say to that Wahhabi, if I were to say you are neither moving nor still, then this means you don't exist. And if I were to say you're not in the masjid somewhere, nor are you outside of the masjid somewhere, then this means you don't exist. That's true. But that doesn't mean that anytime these are negated, that something doesn't exist. Because Allah Ta'ala created motion and He created stillness. Because He created the bodies. Allah created the bodies and He made them move or He made them still. Since he created all of the bodies and existed before all of the bodies, then that means that he existed before any motion and before any stillness. So negating the simultaneous opposites here, or negating the opposites simultaneously here, is not negating Allah's existence. And even in a creation, we don't say that a wall is knowledgeable or ignorant because the wall is not alive. We don't say that Allah moves or is still because he's not a body. He's not connected to something or disconnected from something. And he's not inside of something, and nor is he outside of something because he's not a body. So the fact that both opposites don't pertain to him, the fact is that neither opposite pertains to him. So then we are able to negate both of them simultaneously without denying his existence. Just like we can deny about the wall that it's knowledgeable or ignorant, or that it's blind or seeing. A wall or the stone, it's not seeing and it's not blind. Why not? Because it's not alive. Since it's not alive, then it's not blind and it's not seeing. And so therefore we are negating both opposites simultaneously without denying the existence of the stone. No, I didn't write the example in the book. I just wrote the rule in the book here. The simultaneous negation of opposites is not necessarily impossible. Next point. If God changed, then he only got better or worse. If God changed, then he only got better or worse. Because if the change does not make him worse, then having this change is better than lacking it. Since having something unharmful is better than lacking something altogether. Yani, we say, if God changed, then he got better or worse. Someone might say, no, he didn't get better or worse. He could change without getting better or worse. So we say, no, he couldn't change without getting better or worse. If he changed, he only got better or worse. Why? Because if his change did not make him worse, then that's enough to be better. If his change did not make him worse, then that in itself is enough to be better. Because, why? Because having something is better than lacking it. Having is better than lacking. And existence is superior to nothingness. Existence and presence is superior to nothingness. And having is better than lacking. So if God changed, he either got better or worse. Either he became better than he was, or he became worse than he was. And there's no third option in reality. Someone might say, no, there is a third option, which is he didn't get better or worse. So the answer is, just by the fact that you said he didn't get worse means that he got better. So then they'd say, why? How? So the answer is, because you're saying now that he got something that he didn't have and it didn't make him worse. So if he got something that he didn't have and it didn't make him worse, then it's better than not having it. So that means he got better. Since having something unharmful is better than lacking something altogether. So God would have therefore improved by this change, which means he was worse. And that is all impossible. So that's a nice case for you there to, inshallah, expand your mind for you. Next point. Existence either has a beginning or not. Yes, that's clear. Because if it has a beginning, that means it's a creation. If it does not have a beginning, that means it's the creator. Whatever has no beginning has no end. Yes, because if something has an end, it has a beginning. Why? Because if something has an end, that means that it's bound by time. Time lapses over it so that it could stop. And so if time lapses over it, that means it has a beginning. Because what has no beginning is not subject to time. So existence either has a beginning or not. Whatever has no beginning has no end. Yes. And whatever has an end has a beginning. Yes. Whatever is confirmed to be eternal could not possibly be non-existent. Yes. If something is confirmed by definitive evidence to be eternal, then non-existence is impossible for this one and non-applicable. If something exists in eternity, then it shall exist forever and never cease to be. So, existence either has a beginning or not. Whatever has no beginning has no end. And whatever has an end has a beginning. Whatever is confirmed to be eternal could not possibly be non existent. And something with a beginning could possibly last forever. That's paradise and hell. Something with a beginning could possibly last forever. That's paradise and hell. So these three lines here, commit those to memory so that you can categorize those cases of starting and stopping. Existence either has a beginning, so that's a starting, or not. So that's existence without starting. Whatever has no beginning has no end. Yes. And whatever has an end has a beginning. Yes. Whatever is confirmed to be eternal could not possibly be non existent, and something with a beginning could possibly last forever. Yes. Yes, we can include the soul there. Whatever is confirmed to be eternal could not possibly be non existent here, and something with a beginning could possibly last forever, like the soul.
Sheikh, you put Assalamu alaikum
Wa assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You put a lot of endeavor in the point of or that the change for better and worse,
Yes.
although we understand, and it was stated at the end of that statement that of course this is impossible. But what was the point? Like, there are factions out here that talk about this matter.
Most media point for this being in this book is to give you something to think about that improves your mind. All these points here, uh, there's a religious benefit in them. There's something in the aqidah that benefits you in them. But there's also another benefit that I'm hoping to get, which is to just sharpen your mind. Because this one right here, if God changed, he only got better or worse. Someone's going to argue with you here. Happened to me, someone argued with me about this before. And at the time, I really didn't know the best way to answer that. So if you're just getting introduced to this, then the detail we talked about, you might find it like, wow, that's interesting. I need to think about that. That needs to soak in for me. So if it needs to soak in for you, that means that that's the mental protein you need right there. Then inshallah is going to soak in for you. And if it's soaked in for you, that means right there your mind got expanded. Becomes part of you. What at one point was something that needed to soak in, after that's going to be something that is just incorporated. It's been digested and metabolized. You understand?
what I do understand is I would just answer the person that does not pertain to a law, the change.
Yes. This whole section here, that's why I said this is mental protein, all of this. It's not just this case only that's the point for it being here. It is an exercise, a mental exercise for you to be a strengthener for you, is why it's here. Like,
Better, yes, continue.
yeah, like for example, I could take away from your question that why think about it this way? I would just say such and such. So then you're just going to miss the whole point here. The whole point here is, yeah, think about this. Understand it. Absorb it. Don't say, no, I'm not going to think about that. Let me think about it this way. Think about this one. That's why it's given to you. So you can benefit from it. You don't have to use it. But yeah, you could say to a person, you could respond to a person the way you said that you would respond to them. That's very true and fine. But don't say, and therefore, this point, I'm not going to think about it. Because that would be defeating the purpose for it being here. So I hope that's clear for you.
It is Sheikh Better Thank
You're welcome. Next point. A beginningless chain is when every event depends on a prior event, or what some people call infinite regression. That means going backwards into the past forever. That means to believe that each instance has something before it. Every event has an event before it, without exception. That every event has an event before it. So this is invalid. It is very necessary for the soundness of your mind that you know that any chain of events started with a beginning. Every chain of events has a first event. So don't you know how some people say as a riddle, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And this is something that an atheist would say to deny the existence of God. They say, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So whichever one you choose, then they'll ask you about the other. If you say the chicken, they'll say, well, where did it come from? It didn't hatch. And if you say the egg, then they'll say, then who laid it? So it's going to be somebody with a sick mind that would use something like this to substantiate a beginningless chain, that there must have always been an event before an event. Our answer to that question, what came first, the chicken or the egg, is that the chicken came first. In fact, Allah created males and females first. And then from those males and females, He created their progeny. And Allah created the plants first. And then from those original plants, He created seeds. Every chain of events has an original and first event. A beginningless chain is always impossible. And we gave examples, like to say that the world has no beginning. Like that's what I was just talking to you about now. Why would someone say, what came first, the chicken or the egg? He would say it so to make way to argue that the world has no beginning. To confuse you, first of all, and to confuse the students. He might say that to a bunch of students who are maybe 10 years old, 9 years old, 8 years old. What came first, the chicken or the egg? They have no idea what to say. And it's like being made into a game for them. And then through this game, they will be offered blasphemy. And they would be offered a corrupt way of thinking. This opens the door to falsafa for them, philosophy. Or to say that atoms can be reduced infinitely. This is a form of claiming a beginningless chain. Meaning, to say, okay, here's a piece, here's a rock. This rock, I can break it in half. and then take a half and break it in half, and take a half and break it in half. And I can keep doing that forever and ever and ever. There will always be a way to break a piece into two pieces. This is wrong, because what that amounts to is to say there is no fundamental piece. There is no original piece. That amounts to saying there's no start. So what we say is that you could break that rock and fragment that rock, fracture that rock until you get down to one piece, one microscopic piece that cannot be split. It's too small to be split. It is literally a single piece, so you can't split it. That single piece, that's what we are saying, that anytime you have a chain of events, there must have been an original event, a fundamental event, a first event. When it comes to objects, the equivalent of that first event in a physical object is a fundamental piece that can't be fractured. Let me know if that's not clear for you, please. Or to say that an attribute has an attribute. You can't say an attribute has an attribute, because that leads to say that that attribute has an attribute, which has an attribute, which has an attribute, which has an attribute, and then you could go backwards forever without stopping, and that's impossible. Well, I skipped one. Or that a place is in a place. You don't say, what place is the place in? Rather, you say, place is itself a self-existing expanse. Self-existing, that means here, it's not in a place. Place is not in a place. The place is a place. If the place were in a place, then that means that that place could be in a place, which could be in a place, which could be in a place, which could be in a place, and then it would be valid to go backwards forever, nonstop, which is always impossible. So there has to be an original fundamental instance. In this case, in this example, the place itself. Allah Ta'ala created space. It didn't used to exist. It's not eternal. He created expanse. Allah created expanse. Allah created dimensions. That means void. Allah created void. So you don't say, what place is the place in? Because that leads to an impossibility. Question, is that single piece that cannot be divided called an atom? Traditionally, it is. And when I say traditionally, I mean here this word, this English word, atom. Yes, traditionally, the original meaning of atom is this unsplittable piece. But in contemporary times, scientists claim that atoms can be split. So we say anything that can be split, it's not what we're talking about. So if somebody were to say, no, they proved it. You can split atoms. It's indisputable now. They've done it already. So we're going to say to them, anything that they have split is not what we're talking about, because what we're talking about is something that can't be split. And traditionally, that's called atom. And if you don't want to use the word atom because of modern sensibilities, then if you want, you could say a particle, an indivisible particle, an unsplittable piece or fragment, an unsplittable fragment. Amin Wafiq. And by the way, what's similar to that, when we talk about traditional use of things, what's similar to that, this is a quick side note for you, is planets. Nowadays, they say, yeah, there's something called a planet, and there's something else called a star, and there's something else called a satellite, which is a moon. They say a moon is a satellite. So they say you have planets, and you have stars, and you have satellites. That's all contemporary modern talk. And originally, all those things are planets. Like the sun is a planet and the stars are planets. That's just for your information. Like that, originally, the atom is something unsplittable. Peace. The Muslims are not, it's not unique to Muslims. The Muslims aren't the only people who realized that and figured that out. And also, claiming that all language is man made, this leads to a beginningless chain because the meanings of words are understandable somehow. So, if what made spoken language understandable is sign language, like some people might claim, but they used to do sign language. Then they evolved into spoken language. So, what was it that made the sign language understandable? So, whatever that made that sign language understandable, then the sign language is based on that. So, that right there, what made that understandable? So, here's the question. Let me back up for you. Our spoken language, what makes it understandable? How's understandable? Somebody might say used to be sign language until they evolved. So what made that sign language understandable? That right there, that has to have a beginning. Yani, that has to be first instance. There always has to be, for any chain of events, there always has to be a first one. So that right there, either that's the original one or something else made that understandable before it. So what's correct is that Allah created Adam, he's first man, and he revealed to Adam original languages. So Adam knew languages, yani, from the beginning, as the first instance, and then he taught them to his children. Okay. A beginningless circle is when an event depends upon what depends upon it, and it is always invalid. A beginningless circle is weaker even than a beginningless chain. As a beginningless chain, if you're not paying attention, someone might slip it past you. Meaning, if you're not paying attention, someone might slip past you some invalid concept, some concept that is invalidated because it harbors a beginningless chain. And if you're paying attention, you'd say, wait a minute, this talk of yours is not valid because it implies the validity of a beginningless chain. Let me show you. Because when you said this, that leads to this. And if that's the case, then that means you can keep going backwards forever. And that's impossible, always. Sometimes such ideas that contain a beginningless chain in some way or another, they might be obscure. The beginningless chain in some ideas might be obscure for you. The more you can catch that and identify that, then the sharper you are, inshallah. As for a beginningless circle, that one is even weaker. So that's like to say A created B and B created A. A beginningless chain is like to say a God was created by a creator who was created by a creator who was created by a creator who was created by a creator, and then you keep going backward without stopping, without a first instance. A beginningless circle is like to say A created B and B created A. So that's even weaker, and you probably would catch that one. Yani, you catch that. This is what some people call circular logic. Someone says something, which let's call that A. And then he says something else, we'll call that B. So he used A to get to B, but B goes to A. A gets to B, but B gets to A. It's not valid. You're going to say to that person, hey, wait a minute. This is a circle you're talking here. And you know who employs beginningless circle a lot is psychologists. Psychologists employ beginningless circle a lot, meaning what do? They would have some idea about some kind of a cycle. Everything's a cycle for them. They're always trying to figure out a cycle, how to get back to the beginning from the end for some reason. And so they're going to have a poster or a piece of paper or on the board while they're teaching you. And they're going to have something, and then they're going to say, this leads to this, and with an arrow, then you're saying, this one leads to this, and then this one goes all the way back to the first one. And then everyone's sitting there like, okay, all right, we see, yeah, it makes sense. Now that you make it go, now that you made the end go back to the beginning, now it makes complete sense. And then if you've learned like this, you're going to say, these guys are wacko. All you did was just make a beginningless circle. How the end goes back to the beginning. Wait, we talked about this last time when we first went over the book. So you can review that, inshallah. So moving on, the next point. Existence and non-existence are equal for a possibility. What's a possibility? A possibility is something which could exist or not exist. It's possible. Uh, so a possibility then, existence applies to it and non-existence applies to it. That's what a possibility is by definition. It might exist or it might not exist. It's a possibility. So what's strong, according to our scholars, is that existence and non-existence are equal for a possibility, like a door being opened or closed. Meaning, conceive a door. Okay, you've conceived the door. When I say door, and when you conceive the door in your own mind, this alone, conceiving a door, is not conceiving it opened or closed. It's just conceiving the mere door. So when you conceive the mere door, then which way is it more likely to be, opened or closed? You could test some people's intellects here. Some people might say, it should be opened. Yeah, I conceive it opened. And some others might say, closed. No, it's closed. So the one who says neither open nor closed is more likely. Then that's the one that's the clever one. That's understanding. That's the one that has comprehension here. A door is not more likely to be opened or closed, not by itself. It needs something else outside of itself to make it opened or closed, to open or close it. So that's how a possibility is. To exist or not to exist. It needs something outside of itself to make it exist or not exist. Now, you might say, okay, that's clear. What's the issue here? Non-existence is not more likely for a possibility. So this is the weaker saying. Non-existence is not more likely for a possibility. Though some scholars said it is, since creations come from nothingness. Huh? What does that mean? It means, okay, every creation has a beginning, right? Yes. So if every creation has a beginning, then that means that every creation was preceded by non-existence. Yes, correct. Okay. And every creation is a possibility, actually, right? Yeah, that's right. Every creation is a possibility. Yani, my cup. This cup, it could be existing or not existing. And this cup, it could be in this spot, or it could be in this spot, or it could be in this spot. All of those are possibilities. And each one of these possibilities, the cup itself, and being in this spot, or this spot, or this spot, each possibility was preceded by non-existence. Before the cup existed, it didn't exist. And the cup is in a spot right now, but before it was in that spot, it wasn't in that spot. So non-existence always comes before any possibility. Before. Non-existence is always prior to any possibility. So therefore, some scholars said non-existence then is more likely for a possibility because possibilities come out of non-existence in the first place. Possibilities come into being from non-existence in the first place, so non-existence should be more likely for a possibility. But the sharp scholars, they said no. Actually, existence and non-existence are equal for a possibility, and it's not that non-existence is more likely because it's first. So someone might say, how? How could non-existence not be more likely if non-existence is always first for a possibility before the possibility came into existence? Non-existence is always prior. First here means prior. The answer is because the time when the possibility wasn't existing, Allah could have made it been existing. Allah could have made that possibility been existing at the time it wasn't existing. Yani, it wasn't non-existent by necessity. Let me say it that way. It wasn't non-existent by necessity. By necessity, it was not non-existent by necessity because it could have been existent. The time when it wasn't existing, Allah could have made it exist. Yani, for example, each one of us now we live in this time we live in. If Allah willed, we could have been living at the time of Prophet Dawood, or if Allah willed, we could have been the direct children of Adam, the first humans on earth. Our existence at this time is not necessary. Allah could have made us exist at another time. That's why some of us are older than others. Because Allah made you exist at one time and not another time that He could have made you exist. And He made that one exist at some time and not another time. So actually, existence and non-existence for any possibility are equal. And it's not that non-existence is more likely for a possibility. Is that clear? Alhamdulillah. Next point. The 13 attributes are proven either by God's doings or the necessity of attributing perfection to Him. God's doings means His creating. So any one of the 13 attributes, if you've memorized them, if you haven't memorized them, memorize them by tomorrow. Don't forget, some of you, I'm thinking maybe you didn't memorize them. I'm not going to call you out though. I'm looking at your names here. I'm not going to call you out though, Fulan. I'm not going to call you out, Fulana. So memorize those attributes, all 13 attributes if you haven't. So those 13 attributes of Allah, each one, if you want to prove that attribute, then you can do it this way by referring to God's doings, or this way by referring to the necessity of attributing perfection to Him. So what are the 13 attributes? I'll list them quickly. And you'll write them down if you don't have them, and you'll memorize them if you haven't. Existence. Eternity. That means existence without beginning. Everlastingness. Existence without an end. Oneness. Dissimilarity. Independence. Life. Knowledge. Power. Will. Sight. Hearing. And speech. 13 attributes. So quickly here. What's the proof for God's existence? The existence of creations. So that's God's doings. What's the proof for God's eternality? The necessity of perfection for Him. Because if He had a beginning, then someone else created Him. What's the proof for His everlastingness? The necessity of attributing perfection to Him. Because if He came to an end means, if He wasn't everlasting, then He could come to an end. That's imperfection. And how about oneness? The necessity of attributing perfection to Him, because if He were not one, then He would have a partner. And if He had a partner, then He would be deficient and weak. And if you wonder why, then that means I'd have to go further there, which I don't want to do right now. Try to keep this brief here. So then the necessity of attributing perfection to Him dictates that He is one without a partner. And how about independence? The necessity of attributing perfection to Him. And dissimilarity. The necessity of attributing perfection to Him. And life. His doings. Because since He created things, we knew He's alive. Or else He wouldn't have created anything. And also knowledge. We knew He has knowledge because He created things. Had He not created things, yani, we wouldn't have known that He has knowledge. Because we wouldn't have been existing. And power. And will. We knew He has power and will because He created. And sight and hearing and speech. We know He has sight, hearing, and speech because He's perfect. And if He didn't have sight, hearing, and speech, then He would be blind, deaf, and dumb, which are imperfections. So all the 13 attributes are proven either by God's doings or by the necessity of attributing perfection to Him. I think that's clear. If you have any question, go ahead and ask. Next pointer. Likeness depends on interchangeability. Likeness depends on interchangeability. Substitutability. So if two things are alike, then whatever could happen to one could happen to the other. If two things are alike, whatever applies to one applies to the other. To test the two things are alike, then you just put one in the spot of the other. Yani, if you could do so, that means they are alike. If you can't do so, that means they are not alike. So, if I said to you, bring me two creations, then you can bring me anything that's a creation. So, you could bring me a pen and you could bring me a flower, for example. They are alike because in this case, they are interchangeable. Each one is a creation. If you brought me a pen and you brought me a flower because I asked you for two creations, then I can't say, why did you bring me these? Because you're going to say, well, this one's a creation and this one's a creation. So they are similar. So, but if I said, bring me two animals, then you can't bring me a flower and you can't bring me a pen because they're not animals. So they're not like animals in this case because you can't put them in the place of the animal as far as being an animal, not as far as being a creation, as far as being an animal. So now you can bring me what? You can bring me a worm, you can bring me a bird, you can bring me a fish, but you can't bring me a pen, you can't bring me a flower. So that's how even two creations could be unalike. Don't believe that because two things are creations that they are alike in every way. They're not going to be alike in every way. Sometimes some two things they are alike in some way and they are unalike in some way. In any way you can't exchange them. In any way you can't replace them. In any way you can't interchange them. They are unalike. And in any way you could replace them or interchange them or substitute one for the other, they are alike. So then Allah is not like the creation in any way. Allah and the creation are unalike. They are not alike in any way, even if you use the same word sometimes. So we say Allah exists and we exist. And you can say he really exists. He has a real existence. So someone might say, so then he's like us. Say, no, he's not. They're going to say, but you said he exists and we exist. Say, yeah, that's right. So he's going to say, how he's not like us then? We're going to say, because his existence can't stand for theirs and their existence can't stand for his. They're not interchangeable. So they are unalike. His sight is not like our sight. They are unalike. You are only using the same word. Someone might say, well, what's the difference? Okay, we are actually able to explain. Like we can say, well, his life is without a body and without a soul. Our our lives is by body and soul and flesh and blood and meat and bone marrow. So it's just the same word only. But his life that's without body and without soul and without etc. 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 is not applicable to us. And our life which is by blood and soul and body and flesh and bone marrow, is not applicable to him. So it's there. It's unalike, not similar. It's only the same word. And some people would say, okay, so it's just similar in wording. We're going to say not similar at all in any way. No, it's not similar in wording. It's not similar. Unsimilar. Dissimilar. Unalike. Don't say similar in words. Say agreement and expression. The word, say it's just the same word and the meaning is different. So, two different things. What are two different things? Two different things can validly depart from each other in existence and non existence and time or place. This is why we say Allah is not his attributes and he's not anything else. He's not something else. Allah is neither his attributes nor is he something else. But I'm not going to explain that statement right now. Allah is neither his attributes nor is he something else. If you've learned before, then you know that statement. If you didn't learn before, then just take that statement for now, and inshallah, you can learn its explanation sometime. Any questions so far? I'm trying to speed through these too. Am I going too fast? I hope not. Next point. The mind has three limits. What's a limit? A limit is as far as you can go. The mind has three limits. The word only is not here. Maybe you heard the statement that I just read, that I just repeated. The mind has three limits. Maybe it registered for you that I just said the mind only has three limits. The word only is not there. The mind has three limits. One, God is not his attributes nor something else. I came back. Okay, looks like I got to explain it. Two, the living creature is compelled to choose. And three, certainty that God exists without a how and without a place. So, God is not his attributes, nor is he something else. What does this mean? It means, okay, you know God exists. In Arabic, his name is Allah. And you know God is attributed with attributes. I just told you the 13 attributes that every accountable person is obligated to know. So, his attributes: life, knowledge, power, will, sight, hearing, speech. He's not his attributes, but he's not something else either. Yani, he is not his attributes, nor is he something else. Because if he were his attributes, then that would mean that God is life, and God is knowledge, and God is power. That's not valid. And that would mean that life is knowledge, and power is hearing, and hearing is speech, and speech is will. All that's wrong. God is not his attributes, nor is he something else. Nor is he something else because if he were something else, then it means that it's valid to confirm God without confirming his attributes. And you cannot confirm God without confirming his attributes. If he were his attributes, then it leads to all the blunders that I just told you. And if he were something else, then it means that it's valid that you could confirm God without confirming his attributes. So these are two denials here. God is not his attributes, and God is not something else. Those are two denials. That's not a contradiction. Rather, your mind just can't go any further. This is understandable. But for some people, their minds cannot reach it. It's too far. That's due to the weakness of their minds, not because there's something wrong with this statement. This statement's fine statement, and some people, their minds fall short of comprehending it. So comprehend that well, because this statement will take your mind as far as it can go. Also, the living creature is compelled to choose. Compelled to choose, well, compulsion means lack of choice, and choosing means not being compelled. So, how is he compelled to choose? How does that make sense? Because being under the will of God and being subject to destiny means that there is something out of the creature's control. Just the fact that you exist is out of your control because you didn't make yourself exist. You were brought into existence. You, who's listening to me now, if you're a human, maybe you're a genie listening to me, you were brought into existence not by your own choice or your own will. And you were made to be an intelligent creature that can think, not an animal. And so, right there, just by being given existence and life and intelligence, this in itself compelled you to choose. Because what you're going to do next? You're going to do something. There's no way you're going to not be able to choose. So then there is a choice. We're not forced to do our voluntary deeds. And at the same time, we cannot escape what we will choose to do. So this is, in this issue, as far as your mind can go. If you try to go further than this, you're going to blunder. This is under the topic of destiny. The third limit for your mind is being certain that God exists without a how and without a place. That means conceiving an existence that has no shape or form, and no color, and no space, and no place, no mode, no how. This existence does not change. Just that, conceiving this is a lofty conception. Understanding that God exists without any how and without any place, your mind cannot go further than that. Can you explain number two again? Yes. Some people believe that we are compelled to act, that God forces us to do whatever we do. According to them, right now, God is forcing me to speak to you, to give you this lesson, and to sit in the chair that I sit in. That's not true. And some people, according to them, they create their own deeds. According to them, I am right now creating my own speaking to you, and I have created my own sitting down. That's not true either. Rather, I chose to speak to you, and I chose to sit in my chair. However, I will have never chosen anything other than what I'm doing right now. That which I am involved in now, God knew in eternity that this is what I would be doing at this time. I wouldn't have chosen anything else. It was my choice, and I wouldn't have chosen anything else. In fact, I have to choose something. There's no way I can't choose. I have to choose. I am compelled to choose. Yani, I'm going to, for example, if Allah wills, I'm going to sleep tonight. And then my eyes are going to open up at some time. And then I'm going to make a choice. Stay in the bed or get up. I have to make the choice. I can't avoid it. I am compelled to choose. So I'm going to choose. And then if I get up, then I'm going to make a choice. What I'm going to do, I have to make a choice. Like, I can't just, even if I just stood there and didn't do anything, that's a choice. I am compelled to choose. The living creature is compelled to choose. So that's destiny, Yani. That's in the topic of destiny. This is in the topic of destiny. You don't create your own actions, and you're not forced to do what you do. Yani, I'm compelled to choose, but the fact that I'm choosing means I'm not forced. But there's no way I cannot choose. So if there's no way I can't, if there's no escape, then that's the compulsion. But then when I choose, I wasn't compelled because I made a choice. Your mind cannot go further than this. That's the extent of this case here that your comprehension can reach. It's clear for you, inshallah. So, should I stop here or should I do some more? Okay, stop there. Subhanallah. I'm glad I asked you because I would have kept going. Well, it looks like there's a consensus here. He said, can we say the attribute of knowledge can be proven by both doing and perfection? Yes. Because if he weren't knowledgeable, he'd be ignorant. And ignorance is an imperfection. Ameen wa fikum. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك